Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome. And thank you so much for joining me this evening on the Late One Spills. I want to thank you so much for joining. And very interesting evening. My the Sunday evenings are normally very relaxing. Today is the third of December, 2023. My God, we're getting there right into the what should I say? December. Well, listen, without further ado, I want to thank those joining me on Facebook, those on YouTube, and please feel free to share and to tell your friends about this discussion. The topic tonight is really why is Jamaica holding on to the Privy Council, and it's a very interesting topic because Jamaica is in the move now. Jamaica is on the threshold now of Jamaica becoming a republic. And becoming a republic, that means to say you are going for your independence. I say independence because many people say independence from 1962. But my view sometimes is that really, is it independent or is it a process towards independence? The process towards independence in a way. And that's how I see it, the process to full independence. And if you're talking about the process to full independence, then of course you become a republic. And then at the same time, what you're doing, you're ensuring that all steps are taken in that way. Therefore, your final court of appeal, you bring it home, bring it in the region, because hang on a second, why holding on to the relics of slavery, the relics of the transatlantic movement, the relics of colonialism, the bastion, or you actually, you stay there or you get out of there. And I'm going to have Mr. Matondo Mukulu tonight. Matondo Mukulu, former public defender in Jamaica, acting public defender. And, in recent days, ladies and gentlemen, there was a letter which was coined and which was penned by the Lord Reed, president of the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. And that letter actually stir and spur people to sort of, pen different articles, pen different issues, and actually saying, hang on a second, what is going on here? And hopefully I might be getting Lord Reed at some point. But for now, I want to set the stage and I want to bring in Matondo Mukulu. Don't miss that out on the Late One Spills. Good afternoon. Matondo Mukulu. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good.
Oh,
Good day to you, and good day to your listeners. Good night to your listeners, wherever they are.
are you still working? Are you working every day, man?
Gotta keep
Monday,
it
Monday morning, many things happening in court, isn't it?
going.
Uh,
That's right.
That's right. Well, listen, thank you for coming on, Matunda. Of course, we've been doing our series, and I believe that it is very important to do a series on this hot topic, regarding, why is Jamaica holding on to the Privy Council? And I think the big question is Jamaica holding on to the Privy Council, or is the Privy Council holding on to Jamaica? Which one it is, and I mentioned about Lord Reed recently article, and so many persons came out. Robinson. I was speaking to somebody the other day, and I mentioned Gordon Ramsay. I said, person, no, not Gordon Ramsay. He's not into food. Robinson. Michael Hilton came out. Different persons came out and actually say their piece. But in a nutshell, to start the stage, what's your take on everything now? Because Jamaica is moving towards a republic, and therefore one would believe that everything is moving that way. But it seems like there's some holding back at the same time in a trust of it.
Yeah, it's holding back, but I think it's important that we state at the outset that the Privy Council doesn't have any power or powers that it can use to compel us to stay with it. It's a matter for us to decide when and if we do abolish appeals to the Privy Council. I mean, the truth of the matter is that this was attempted in 2004 by
Yes.
the then Patterson administration, because that administration had brought to Parliament three statutes that were passed by a simple vote, simple majority vote, like any other parliament.
Yes.
And the then opposition, the Jamaican Labour Party, appealed against the appealed and say that legislative procedure was unlawful. The Privy
Mm.
Council agreed with the Jamaican Labour Party, but as Dr. Stephen Vassiani has noted in a couple of his articles that he has written
Yeah.
on this topic, is that that decision of the Privy Council in 2005,
Mm.
Marshall Burnett, I think, was not beyond criticism. And I say this because one of the things that the Privy Council did then in that decision was to say that the way in which the then government had abolished appeals to the Privy Council, that it affected the entrenched positions of the Supreme Court in Jamaica and the Court of Appeal.
Mm.
But importantly, the Privy Council could not point to any specific provision within the Constitution that said that a simple majority vote could not be used to abolish appeals
Yes.
to the Privy Council. And it's as if the Privy Council was asking the Jamaican government, or the Jamaican Parliament, sorry, to have the CCJ entrenched in our
Mm.
Constitution to replace the Privy Council itself an unentrenched court.
Yes.
In other words, they're saying, well, you need to entrench this court if you're going to replace the Privy Council. But the Privy Council itself was never entrenched in our Constitution, in the Jamaican Constitution. The other Caribbean countries in which a more complicated procedure was adopted by the framers of those constitutions, it
Yes.
replaced the Privy Council. We, on the other hand, in Jamaica, opted at the time of independence not to have the Privy Council being entrenched in our constitution. And I suspect, and
Mm.
many academic writers have said this is because at no point did Sir Alexander Bustamante or Norman Manley thought for a
Yeah.
second that the Privy Council would have been there forever.
Mm.
What we at the time of our independence, and all the information that I've looked at tells us this, that it was seen as a temporary measure.
Yeah.
If I could
Mm.
read for your your viewers the report of the Jamaican Independence Conference that was held in 1962. This is what was said. Apart from certain entrenched provisions, the Constitution may be amended by a majority of all the members of each House.
Mm.
There will be ordinarily entrenched and specially entrenched provisions. In other words, if it's not entrenched, then it can
Yeah.
be gotten rid of by a simple majority vote. And so,
Yeah.
I say that
Yeah. Yeah.
to say this. I've heard very uninformed conversations by persons who should know better, saying, "Well, we're going to put it to a referendum." Well, the Constitution doesn't require that.
It doesn't require that.
No.
Okay. Let's go back as I say. Let's wheel and come again in a way. Let's break it down. Because many people, these type of topic, as you also say, when we did our constitutional roadshow in the UK,
Mhm,
constitution and these discussions are not sexy subjects. Not many
mhm,
people really get into these things. But let's break it down. What is the Privy Council? Because in recent days, there have been Andrew Holness became a part of the Privy Council, but you got to break down because there's a judicial arm and there's also the council arm. So, what are we talking about when we say the Privy Council? Because it's broken down into different areas,
Well,
and
first,
for
in
education purpose, yes.
the context of tonight's discourse, we're
Yeah.
talking about the formal title for the court is the Judicial
Mm.
Committee of the Privy Council. In
Yes.
its modern form, it was created by an act of the Westminster Parliament of 1833, which
Mhm.
effectively, prior to that act, you, you had councillors who were judges and some who were not judges, who technically were advising the monarch. But what
mm,
they've done, what they did in 1833, the year before uh, enslavement was abolished, what they did was to create the, the Judicial Committee in its current format, where the only persons who sit as part of the committee to advise the monarch are judges, professional judges. So it in all for us now, the committee um, is our final court of appeal. It acts as a
yeah,
final court of appeal, not just for Jamaica, but also Grenada, Mauritius, and their Saint Kitts
yeah,
countries in the Caribbean. It's staffed by a registrar, and
yeah,
the judges who sit on the Privy Council as judges are usually the judges of the who sit in the UK Supreme Court. I say
yes,
usually because you can have Court of Appeal, UK Court of Appeal judges sitting as part of the Privy Council.
mm,
Very rarely, or should I say, theoretically, judges from throughout the Commonwealth can sit by invitation on the Privy
mm,
Council. The former president of the Caribbean Court of Justice, prior to the inauguration of the Caribbean Court of Justice in 2005, Chief Justice Byron,
yeah,
he was nominated to sit, but he had never sat on the case. The last Caribbean or judge who sat on an actual hearing was Chief Justice Zaka from Jamaica.
Zaka, yeah,
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 that was in 2004 or 2005, thereabout.
mm,
Um, but invariably, very rarely do you have judges from the Commonwealth, or for that matter, from the Caribbean, sitting
yeah,
on the Privy Council. So these are judges principally who sit within the UK
yeah.
judicial system, and you appeal. You seek permission to appeal, or in those cases where you have a right to appeal,
And,
you.
and yeah, and if I indulge a bit, you see, I just put up some images there. One is the Lord Reed, President of the Supreme Court,
Mhm,
uh, the Right Honorable Lord Reed of Alimore. There's Lord Hodge,
mhm,
Deputy President of the Supreme Court. There's Lord Lloyd Jones, Justice of the Supreme Court, Lord Biggs, Lord Sales, Lord Hamblin, Lord Leggett, Lord Burroughs, and it continues with Lady Rose and to Lady Simmer. So what we're seeing here, Matundo, are you trying to say that at one point Judge Zaka was there, would have been here as well?
Well, not really. I mean, you're usually brought in when you have the Commonwealth
Mm,
judges coming in, brought in for a particular case. They're brought in for a particular
yeah.
case or a couple of cases. But it's not a permanent sitting as you would have had, as you have now with, say, Lord
Mm,
Reed Hodge and those persons. Basically, once you
yeah.
are a member of the Supreme Court, you
Yeah.
effectively automatically you're a member of the Privy Council, Judicial Committee of the
Mm,
Privy Council.
mm,
Usually sits to hear permission. About three permission applications are considered, I think, about two or three judges, but the full court, usually five, or in extraordinary circumstances, can go
mm.
up to nine judges.
One thing I wanted to look at was what cases then go to the Privy Council. Because I was looking and doing research and I saw a case there which was NCB, which is there. What sort of cases? Where does the Privy Council we know sit in the UK,
Hmm.
you know, and how does one get access to these judges and access to the Privy Council? And I think the big question is why there's this hold on it. Aren't we very effective in the Caribbean? Are we not confident in ourselves?
Well, let's start with the first question. How does one get access to the
Yeah.
Privy Council? Well,
Mm,
usually, from in the context of Jamaica,
mm,
um, you get access having brought your case to the Court of Appeal in Jamaica in the context of a civil case, a non-criminal
Yeah.
case, you seek permission from your local court. Okay, you seek permission from your local court. Local court probably grants you permission, and then you make your application to the Privy Council in the UK. Now,
Mm.
because of the advent of technology, what you have now is a situation where you get access, you file your documents electronically. You don't need to file them via the post as would have obtained in the 1980s or so forth. But importantly, and invariably, persons use solicitors in the UK to
Mm.
file. They will be on record for as the responding lawyers
Yes.
of their details. The truth of the matter is, there's been a procedural change, which certainly allows you don't necessarily have to use UK solicitors as your agents to make the appeal to the Privy Council. In fact, if you have a barrister in the UK who is a direct access
Direct
barrister
access. Yeah.
who has litigation rights, you can engage that person. But invariably, and the Jamaican attorneys, of course, have right of audience before the Privy Council because it's the final court of appeal, final appellate court for the Jamaican judicial system. So if you have the case and you want to appeal, technically you make the appeal, but that's the in principle. In practice, it involves a great degree of costs because
Mm.
you are talking about cost to get a lawyer to appeal to this final court, and if your lawyer wants to go in person as opposed to not via electronic
Yeah.
platforms, then that's another cost that has to be borne in mind. I mean, undoubtedly cost more, and I hear people
Yeah.
say it, and it's true that you can't forget that you Jamaicans will need or do need a visa to come to the UK. Now, the
Yeah.
flip side of that, and I think Lord
Yeah.
Reed
Yeah. I
mentioned
was gonna. Yeah. You're gone. I was gonna touch on something by Lord
yes,
Reed. Yeah.
Lord Reed mentions it, and correctly he does so. That well, you can have appeals via cloud video platforms. That's true, but contrast this with this important contrast that I should say with this important point that whilst in the UK during the COVID period, there was an encouragement. Well, inevitably, everyone had to do hearings online.
Yeah. Virtual
Yeah,
CVP. Yes. Yeah. Mm.
certainly now most judges are encouraging, if you like, a return back to the physical courtrooms in family cases. For
Mm.
example, in the UK, it's only in exceptional circumstances will the court allow virtual hearings. The preference is in-person hearings. I
Yes.
mean, I myself have been in court in a family context where I'm in London and I've had to attend hearings in Newcastle. But the judge
Mm.
in that case, whilst it was 10 days, I had to be there in person. There were other smaller hearings that I was allowed to attend via video.
Mm.
The point being made here is that in the UK, there's this move towards back to be in court in person. So it's in that context that I'm quite puzzled by what
Yeah.
Lord Reed says. In other words,
But could Lord Reed sort of refer to the fact that these are international cases? Because he said here, we offer hearings online. This is what he said. We offer hearing. One doesn't know if that is in the context of how it was during the COVID period or is it now, so that lawyers can address us from their offices in Jamaica without having to incur the time and expense involved in traveling to London. So what he said, there's no reason for the cost involved in traveling to the UK to be a barrier to justice. Further, the hearings that we hold in London are all streamed live on the internet and can also be watched and catch up. Uh, is that there need to be some clarification? Is he going along the grain of the typical average case in the UK? This is now an international thing. Does that there needs to be some clarification from him from
Well,
that point?
it needs to be some clarification. Yes, I would agree,
Yeah.
because firstly, the case starts at about 10 o'clock in UK time. I mean, who wants to
Yes.
be up at 5 o'clock in the morning addressing a court on an
Mm,
important matter?
mm,
I for one, if I was a litigant, if I have a
yeah.
case, I don't want my lawyer to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning in my jurisdiction
Yes.
addressing court. It's an important matter.
Mm,
Be
mm,
I'm on, it's a criminal matter, I'm appealing against my sentence, or a
mm.
commercial matter with thousands of dollars or pounds, or entailed. I don't want to be up at that time. That's one.
Yes.
Two, um, you're telling me effectively I can follow online. Well, what if I want to be in person? And I think
Mm,
that's why the Lord Reed said they offer it. It's not
yeah.
mandatory. It's not mandatory, because he knows full well that in the UK the judiciary encourages persons to be in person. In fact,
Yes.
in the Central London County Court, the sort of de facto rule is, if the hearing is likely to last more than 45 minutes, it has to be in person.
Yes.
It has to be in person. So that sort of qualification, there's a qualification that's implied in it, is in
Mm,
his statement when he say it's offered. But I think the issue of access goes beyond if you are in person or you're on video.
mm,
The access has another dimension to it. This
yes.
court is seen as a remote court. Okay, the cost involved is prohibitive. On any calculation, it costs more to take a case to the Privy Council than it does to take a case to the Caribbean Court of Justice.
Mm,
And what the research has certainly shown is that in the case of Barbados, there has been a 320% increase in the numbers of cases going to the Caribbean Court of Justice since
yeah.
Barbados has acceded to the appellate jurisdiction
Yeah.
of of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Because, in other words, Sid, and I hope your viewers understand this point,
Mm,
because the Privy Council is seen as this remote court, and
yes.
because of the machinations that are involved in accessing that court, then
Mm,
the distance and the machinations that are involved effectively work against it in a
mm,
sense of access. There's no
yeah.
point, for example, in me having access, having a right to appeal to a court, but at the
Mm,
same time, the cost of doing so is prohibitive. I have to engage lawyers in the UK to to gain access to it. That
yeah.
in and of itself can act as a barrier, and certainly what
Mm,
the data coming out of the Caribbean Court of Justice is showing, that there's been a marked increase in the number of appeals
yeah.
that go into that court. And I tell you, that is important,
Yeah.
for the development of our jurisprudence, because the more cases that you have going to final courts, uh,
Yes.
the more you're giving the judiciary the opportunity to make pronouncements on
Yeah.
those issues.
Yeah. So therefore, that answers the question. Then, do appellants pay to get their cases heard at the Privy Council? Without a
Well,
doubt, yes.
yes, yes. I
Yeah.
mean, Jamaica does
Yeah.
not pay, the Jamaica government does not pay for the administrative costs involved in getting appeals to the Privy Council.
Yeah.
But the litigants themselves, you and I, if we want to have a
Yeah.
case there, we got to pay the lawyers to get there, and invariably it's going to cost more, because you're going to
You,
pay in sterling.
yeah. Someone mentioned last night on my other show. They're saying, Sid. He says, Sid, listen to this. Jamaica is aiming to become a republic, and Jamaica is going to the Privy Council as a final court of appeal. Okay, we're there. Then why do we need a Caribbean Court of Justice again, another region thing? This is what the person was saying. Why don't we just have our High Supreme Court, which is our final court of appeal? And then when it come on to regional issues within the Caribbean or so, then you go to the CCJ.
Mhm.
So
Well,
he was saying, are we what he was actually alluding to? are we still not confident in ourselves, our final court in Jamaica, for argument's sake? What do
Uh,
you say about it?
I mean, I've heard that argument before, and
Yeah. Okay.
thankfully it has died. Bruce Golding once, former Prime Minister, sorry, Bruce
Mm.
Golding, once muted that that argument for Jamaica final court of appeal, but I don't think it was done seriously, to be honest.
Yes.
And I tell
Mm.
you why. One, the administrative cost of running our own final appellate court would be disproportionate to the numbers of appeals that you get. Okay.
Yes.
Secondly, um, we have already invested a great degree of money, a great sum of money in establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice.
Mm.
Has paid to establish that court. And there's a trust fund that was established, and all the participating territories in the of CARICOM had to pay into that. I think it's a
Yes.
100 million, 100. I can't remember how much, but it needs to be topped up. But a Jamaican final court of appeal is not practical, and it would be a disproportionate cost when you have already a Caribbean Court of Justice that we are paying into. I don't think it's our systems in the Caribbean in terms of
Mm.
the legal systems are pretty similar. I mean, we all in the English speaking Caribbean use our own civil procedure rules.
Yes.
Barbados has its own, so does St. Lucia, but it's quite similar.
Mm.
Yeah. So I don't think it is an indication of a lack of confidence why we are saying a Caribbean Court of Justice as opposed to a Jamaican Final Court of Appeal. Nobody has ever and seriously
Yes.
contemplated that. Only Bruce Golding in a moment of I suspect desperation and out of when you're out of an argument and they haven't I think he was just had no other reasons why
Yes.
he's opposing abolishing a piece of the Privy Council. He just tossed that. But thankfully, he himself has now abandoned all hopes of a Jamaican final court of appeal, and he does
Okay.
support having a
So,
Privy CCJ.
so therefore, there's a general consensus then until we move away from the Privy Council. Those who have the will to do that, that
Hmm.
the CCJ would be the best way forward. Then, yep.
Yeah, yeah. There is when I said general consensus
Mm.
amongst, and I say this deliberately,
Yeah.
um, amongst right-thinking progressive persons, yes, um, the consensus is that the Privy Council has served us well, but it's time to move on. And I
Mm.
don't, you won't get me at any point lambasting the Privy Council or speaking
Yes.
ill of it. It served us well,
Yes.
but when I look at the Jamaican Constitution, I realize that the Privy Council is not an entrenched institution, or the right to appeal is not an entrenched procedure. And
Yes.
so it tells me, on an ordinary and common sense reading of the Constitution, that those who framed our Constitution at no point thought that this was a relationship that would go on forever.
Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining Late One Spill this Sunday evening, and I hope you're taking in the conversation. Thank you for those on TikTok as well. Thank you for those on Facebook and YouTube. Remember to like and share and tell people about this a very important discussion. I'm having Matondo Mukulu, former public defender, barrister in the UK, and constitutional expert, and we're just having this discussion because what I want to do is to have some follow-up discussion. And just to let you know that on Wednesday, hopefully this week, touchwood, I should have imminent King's Council use small on the same particular topic. Let's go on to I think we addressed this already, but I just want to shut it down properly because we dealt with it in the opening. Do Caribbean judges sit as part of the body of judges at the Privy Council with the justices?
The straightforward answer is that
Yeah.
will be determined by if they get an invitation to do so. Chief Justice Zaka, former
Yes.
Chief Justice of Jamaica, did so, I think, 2014 or
Yes.
2005. Chief Justice Byron of Trinidad,
Yeah.
he had never sat on a case, but certainly he was he was part of the pool of judges, if you like.
Yeah.
But he had never
Is it?
sat on a
Yeah,
case.
yeah. Is it because of a cultural aspect in a particular case? There is some specifics, some level of subjectivity to it. Because one would say that the law is a law. I mean, one can just deal with the evidence. Or was it that? Was it there's something crucial to some sort of cultural aspect, or
Well, well, not necessarily, because when not necessarily. I
yeah,
can't. I don't know what determines it,
yes,
but certainly when Chief Justice Zaka sat, it wasn't on a case from
mm,
Trinidad. It wasn't
yes,
a case from Jamaica. So technically, yes, but when you look at
yeah,
the rarity with which Caribbean judges have sat in the Privy Council,
yeah.
um, you have to say, well, in principle they can, but in practice and in reality, it rarely happens.
Okay. A five. Has Jamaica ever tried to abolish appeals to the Privy Council? Um,
Yes, yeah. I mean, as I said at the start,
mm,
Jamaica, former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson, when he was Prime Minister, he piloted three bills through Parliament,
mm,
and effectively abolished, and the purpose of those bills were to abolish appeals to the Privy Council. The
yes.
Jamaican Labour Party took the view that those bills were unconstitutional. The judges of the Privy Council agreed with the Jamaica Labour Party, and effectively what the Privy Council said in that case, amongst other things, was, well, the Jamaican Supreme Court and the Jamaican Court of Appeal,
Mm,
those two courts are entrenched courts, and so you can't really replace them with a court. Sorry, you can't
mm,
replace the Privy Council with a court that is
yeah,
not entrenched.
yeah.
Truth of the matter is, the Privy Council was not able to point to any specific section within our Constitution that supports its conclusion,
Mm.
because the truth of the matter is that the Privy Council was never entrenched in our Constitution, and that's important to note.
And Matunda, this all brings us to the crux of everything, and which is the key question which I started with is, I said, why is Jamaica holding on to the Privy Council? But the next question is, what is it? What's the next question? I had a question right here, six. It says here, is the Privy Council holding Jamaica?
No, the Privy Council is not holding Jamaica. I think Lord
Yeah,
Reed has made it
you ma-
clear,
you made it clear as well. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
that it's a matter for us. I mean, the issue is this: we have a political problem on this issue in Jamaica. It's not a
Mm,
legal problem. We have a political problem that must be solved, and the nature of the problem is that the Jamaica Labour Party, that's the governing party in Jamaica now, has somehow seemingly held on to this idea
mm,
that we won't go to the CCJ without kicking and screaming. We have to
mm,
make it uh, a big issue. We have to, and seemingly they want us to take it to a referendum, the JLP, which will only serve to politicize it, frankly.
mm.
So the Privy Council is not holding us. The People's National Party has always supported abolishing appeals to the Privy Council. It is a Jamaica Labour Party, make no bones about it. That has been the stumbling block in this move. In this move,
Mm.
initially, um, Edward Siago said that, well, the CCJ has just been formed. Let's give it some time,
Yes.
between 2005 and 2023. That's
Mm.
sufficient time. The Jamaica Labour Party still has not given a resounding argument as to why we must continue appealing
Yeah.
to the Privy
So,
Council.
so what you're actually saying, while we're embarking on the road to whether Jamaica to be a republic or not, Jamaica can now, if we got the will and the determination, leave the Privy Council.
Yeah, we can. If it's a
Yeah.
political question, the problem that
Yes.
we have is a political one. That if the Jamaica Labour Party just wakes up one morning and decide, let common sense prevail.
Mm.
Because I'll tell you something, Sid. Quite recently, a poll was done amongst persons, I think 18 to about 25. The
Yes.
majority of those persons said we want to abolish appeals to the Privy Council.
Mm.
So I remember asking the current Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs if the whole issue is not just one that I asked her, sorry, whether or
Mm.
not she and the government have taken note of the recent polls, and she said yes, we have taken um, note of what's been said in the polls, and
Yes.
those who ignore polls are usually the ones who get flogged by it. So
Well, that's very interesting. And I'll ask persons in the last minutes that we have here is to send some questions. I want to put a question here that Black Reparation Nation said: how does race, ethnicity, and culture impact the proceedings? And I guess where it's coming from is the fact that, hey, we're all here from the Caribbean, for Jamaica, and I showed the different judges a while ago. They're all English, white men, women. You know, how does race, ethnicity, and culture impact is that something that people are taking into consideration? The political, I won't say masters, I'll say servants. I'm not going to give the government of Jamaica any higher level position than they are servants of the Jamaica.
well, how does race, ethnicity, and culture impact the proceedings? I mean, law does not take place in a vacuum. Yeah.
Yes.
And uh, I be loath to think that issues of culture certainly play a role
Mm.
in, I think the person said, the proceedings.
Yes.
Or I think it was a Caribbean intellectual, Simon McIntosh, who said this, and I think this is important. So long as we remain the
Mm.
subject of the British Crown, with its Judicial Committee as the apex in the hierarchy of the legal system, of our legal system, it is to be expected that our constitutional discourse
Yes.
would reflect a cluster of values, intellectual
Mm.
orientations, and practices that carry a distinct British cast. Our constitutional conversation is carried out in a foreign voice. We are either silenced or are constrained to speak within the institutions
Mm.
and traditions of interpretation of the colonial constitutions that have been imposed on us. Now,
Yes.
that's an that's what Simon McIntosh and renowned Caribbean legal intellectual has pointed out. But
Yes.
on a practical level, the judicial culture in the Privy Council, when compared to that in the Caribbean Court of
Yes.
Justice, is telling. And give an example.
Yeah.
We have in our Caribbean constitutions what I call savings clause.
Mm.
Yep. Now, effectively, what these clauses do is that they preserve laws that would have been in place
Mm.
before we got independence. And
Yes.
so, if that whenever that law or those types of laws come under challenge, what you've seen happening in the Privy Council is that these laws were usually preserved because they were prior to independence, because we have savings clauses in our
Yes.
constitution. The Privy Council has always used a less than progressive interpretation of these clauses. When
Yes.
you look at the CCJ's interpretation of those clauses, there's a case called Nervais in the Caribbean Court of Justice, as pronounced on. The Caribbean Court of Justice judges have taken a more progressive interpretation to savings clauses, basically
Yes.
announcing their death. So it goes back to what your viewers asked about the culture.
Mm.
Yes, culture does play in terms of jurisprudential culture. You
Yes.
understand? It does play a role. Does race, ethnicity? Um, I'm not so sure in terms of the decisions that the judges make. No,
Yeah.
I don't think so. Well, I know no, it doesn't. But what you do get when you read the judgments of the Privy Council is this: that even the judges themselves recognize that they are a foreign court.
Mm.
Okay, the language they use and the constant reference to the particular country. Yeah,
Yeah.
it, you get you know it is a foreign court that's looking at a matter unrelated to the United Kingdom. If you ask me, it's high time that
Mm.
we move away from it, not because somehow we think the Privy Council is defective, but because they're equally qualified and competent persons within
Mm.
the region who
Yeah.
can do this. This is part of judicial independence is important. If we're politically
Yeah.
independent, why not be judicially independent?
Yeah. You see, Michael Hilton, noted constitutional lawyer, has disputed the claims made by the Privy Council Lord Robert Reid on keeping Jamaica appellate. Gordon Robinson says Privy Council hypocrisy rather, and also editorial in the papers. Key figures are coming out. You're coming out. What is what is the government? What is Chuck saying? What is Malahoo Ford saying? Are they just sitting back? I mean, what can actually ensure? Because people are saying it, the polls are saying it, but is it that lame duck leadership in the sense of this part? I'm saying lame duck leadership in this particular
Issue.
issue. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're asking what you're asking what needs to be done, or is it that leadership is
Well, yeah.
lacking?
What needs to be done? But we recognize that there's a leadership factor as well. How
Well, I
can
think the
people?
first thing that needs to be told is the good news about the Caribbean Court of Justice in
Yes.
terms of the quality of its decisions, how people get access to it, and who are the persons serving on the court, and how the court goes about selecting its judges, and the
Yeah.
fact that the judges are significantly insulated.
Yeah.
It's part of the good news, because one of the things that you hear those who talk about uh, retaining appeals to the Privy Council, they say,
I know what you're
"Well,
gonna say. I know what you're gonna say. Go
we,
on. Yeah.
we, we're afraid that the
Yes.
politicians will influence
Mm.
the judiciary." Well, if you look and see how the judges of the Privy Council are selected, you will see that y- anyone who has that view is either is either two steps away from a mental hospital, or
Yes.
has not bothered to read the
Mm.
process that the judges are insulated from that type of political in influence, both financially, because as I said, the Cabinet Court of Justice is financed by an independent means, so
Mm.
no territorial government can impact things by withholding funds, because the funding is independent. The money is placed in a trust fund. Secondly, there's a mechanism
Mm.
in place, a judicial regional. Let's paraphrase. It's a regional judicial body
Yes.
that goes about selecting them, and
Mm.
it's just not a case. Well, it's who sits on that body, who are the persons who sits on that judicial Caribbean regional judicial body. So
Yes.
the 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 risk of any interference is next to nothing. What is happening is that the Jamaican, what I've seen since Lord Reed has made his pronouncement, I've seen the information minister um, um, be retweeting that letter somehow, say like he's holding it up
Yes.
and say, "Oh, here you
Mm.
go, here you go. We can
Mm.
keep Privy Council because Lord Reed wants to keep." Says that, well, it's not true that we want you to go. The truth of the matter is, Lord Reed's court might not have said it, but
Yes.
certainly Lord Phillips's court has said it. Lord
Yeah.
Nuremberger's court has not said it. Lord Nuremberger is the one would have been the head prior to Lord Reed. His court did not say that, but certainly Lord Phillips, whilst he was head of the Supreme Court, has
Yeah.
effectively said, "Well, why don't these people go ahead and go establish their own court because we're
Yeah.
time is being taken up doing so." But to me, Sid,
Yeah.
irrespective of what is said by the lords in the UK, this issue about abolishing appeals to the Privy Council was never about whether or not the Privy Council want us to stay. It was always about whether or not we have sufficient confidence within ourselves,
Mm.
within our professionals that we have paid for and trained to have our own and final court of appeal. The resounding
Yes.
answer must be yes. It's a matter of judicial independence. Jamaicans have no say at all, no
Mm.
say at all in
Wow.
selecting the judges that
Yeah.
sit
In the
on the
Privy
Supreme
Council.
Court in the Privy
CCJ.
Council, in the Privy Council.
Yeah, Privy
Yes,
Council. Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
and so when I hear people say that, oh, um, somehow uh, it's a court that we can trust, and well, you had no role, direct or indirect, in
Yes.
determining who sits on that court, and you're content to do that. But when there's a regional court that you have helped to establish, and the treaties establishing it have insulated the judges,
Yeah.
you have not bothered to read the determinations or the decisions of that court, but you want to somehow level criticism. I've heard
Mm.
Marley Mallow Ford, again, the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, saying that somehow Lord Reed's letter has put to bed the issue of access. Nonsense. Nonsense.
Yes.
Because as the judges of the Caribbean Court of Justice has shown, that there's been a marked increase in the number of appeals over a 20-year period or so,
Yes.
number of appeals going to the CCJ. In other words, there's been an increased
Mm.
utilization of the procedure of appeals, as opposed to when those courts had appeals to the Privy Council. Last point, New Zealand would have abolished
Mm.
appeals to the Privy Council in 2003 or 2004. And one of the things that the lawyers and the academics in New Zealand had
Mm.
said at the time, it's a foreign court. It is a
Yeah.
foreign court. If New Zealand, which has a more closer history, yes, to this country, to the UK, than we could ever
Yes.
have, yeah, can see it as a foreign court. What say us? What
Well,
say?
yeah. Well, one of the things that Gordon Robbins, he was picking a point on that same issue about accessible and everything, and he said, "Goody goody two shoes." Since COVID-19, the concept of online court hearing, as you said, has taken all over the world. And what he said in the famous case of the General Legal Counsel and Jambar, 9 lawyers traveled to London for the appeal. There was a 10, but due to last minute personal issues, she couldn't make the trip. There are numerous other travel related challenges.
Of course.
One counsel discovered at the last minute that her visa had expired. She had to jump through hoops to get a renewal.
Hmm.
But what he said is that Jambar lawyers paid English solicitors 10,000 to file appeal papers, and another 2,000 to appear with them. Plane tickets cost and everything like so yes. Lord, we just really touch on a few aspect of things there, sort of just a general thing. And what he said, which I believe is the crux of everything, he said, let me start by saying that I, on the other judges on the JCPC, the Judicial
Committee of the
Commission,
Privy Council.
yeah, regard it as an honor to serve the people of Jamaica as your highest court. This is a major responsibility and one that the court takes very seriously. But the decision on whether to retain the JCPC is entirely for the Jamaican government
Of
and the
course.
people. Now, Matunda, it says Jamaica government and the people, but somehow the people is not in the process. The
No.
people are not. The people's voices are not coming up. It is stuck. I want to say I said stuck one time. Somebody laughed at me. It is stuck at the Jamaica government.
Well, I mean, you see, It part of the hypocrisy in all of this is
Mm,
this, that the Constitutional Review Commission or Committee in
mm,
Jamaica says it will not deal with the issue of abolishing appeals in Privy Council
yes,
until it has dealt with the issue of abolishing the king as a head of state.
yes, yes.
I can tell you this: it is far easier to remove to abolish appeals than it is to remove the king as head of state. It's far
Mm,
easier to procedure. The government has not, because it has placed this as in the second phase, has not made this a priority to go out
mm.
there and start talking to people
I mean, yeah.
specifically about this thing. Because I tell you something, Sid,
Mm,
abolishing appeals to the Privy Council has a more direct impact on the lives of Jamaicans
yes,
than abolishing the monarchy,
yes,
abolishing the monarch as our head of state.
yes.
Okay? Let me repeat in simple language. If Jamaica abolishes appeal to the Privy Council, it will have more of a direct impact on the lives of every single Jamaican than removing King Charles as head of state. And that
Right.
is why the government of Jamaica, in the form of the Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs, ought to put this issue on the table now, because it makes no sense.
Mm,
When you go to the Privy Council and you get a decision, it says that the board, the Privy Council board, will advise His Majesty.
yes.
So if we've abolished appeals, if we're thinking about abolishing, doing away with the king as a head of state, why is it that we're content to listen to the king's privy councillors
Mm,
telling us how to resolve our legal issues? These are some the government. I have, as I say, I have no quarrel with the law lords. They're doing a job. I
yeah.
have no quarrel with them. My problem is with the Jamaican Labour Party and its pretense.
Mm,
It's weak jellyfish bone like
mm,
defense of holding on to the Privy Council. It still hasn't made a cogent argument.
mm. And
It,
and that's one of the reasons why, as you say, because I just saw it a while ago, the clip, that's the bit which has been sent around on TikTok and
Mhm.
Instagram by the minister there. Privy Council here to serve Jamaican. That's it. We sorted now. Done deal. Privy
Yeah,
Council has
as if that is the issue. As if
yes.
that is the issue. Why hasn't she engaged, for
Mm,
example, with this argument? Has the Caribbean Court of Justice delivered? Yes.
yes.
Why hasn't she dealt with this argument? Why should a judge, someone who sets out to be a judge in the Caribbean, why should he or she ambition stop at the Jamaican Court of Appeal? Yeah.
Yes.
Why should, it's as if you're saying, as a politician, you enter as an MP, you can become a minister, but
Yeah.
guess what? You cannot be prime minister.
Yeah. I want to just before we go, I was looking at some of the current cases, and the top one is actually National Commercial Bank Jamaica Limited appellant versus NCB Staff Association respondent Jamaica Court of Appeal Jamaica. What is the correct interpretation and application of a formula relating to participation in a profit sharing scheme?
Mm.
Matundo, why did this not go to the Caribbean Court of Justice?
Because the Caribbean Court of Justice is not our final court of appeal. Simple as that.
Mm.
It's not our final court of appeal.
But at the same time, you said, if I'm not mistaken, that um, cases have been going there, which has reduced the need for the Privy Council.
Yeah, cases from the countries that have now
Okay.
abolished the peace of the Privy
Right,
Council, and these
right,
countries
right,
are Belize,
right,
Guyana, Saint Lucia,
right,
Dominica, and Barbados. There are
right,
five countries that they're using the Privy Council as the Caribbean Court of Justice as its court, final
right.
appellate court. Dominica, Barbados, Guyana, Saint Lucia,
Yes, yes,
and Belize. I think St.
So
Lucia was the
Jamaica,
last.
so Jamaica struggling in the back, staying with the last relic of the colonial masters, wanting to be there. Because I was looking at the list of privy councillors, and I was going through all of them, and I saw Andrew Holness' name right in there, 2022 or so, 2021, becoming a privy councillor. Of course, that's a distinction there, you
Yeah.
know. Um, so I guess people just want to be a part of this old relic instead of
I mean,
understanding.
it's
Yeah,
one of the when you research deeper and deeper about the Privy Council, you realize
yeah,
in its current format, it's effectively it was a colonial court. It's a
yes,
colonial court,
yes,
and those who those who want to hold on to it have to explain to me why it is that I must hold on to a
yeah,
relic of colonialism. Simple as
yes.
that.
Bastion of
So,
slavery. I call it the
I mean,
bastion of slavery.
I just don't understand it. I mean, and I again I
Yeah.
say, certainly since 1962,
Mm,
you there's some seminal decisions that came out of the Privy Council that did well. They were good decisions.
mm,
I've only had quarrel with one, and it is the one that knocked back the establishment of the Caribbean of abolishing appeals
mm,
to the Privy Council. That's the only decision that I've read
mm.
that I've always said, yeah. But
Yeah.
it's a matter for us and the weak government that's on this. The government is weak on this
Mm,
issue. Weak
mm.
issue.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Matunda. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's food for thought, and this is not just like doing a discussion, which is going to be okay. We had a nice discussion. Gonna follow this through to the T. Follow this through. Increase the momentum. 'Cause I don't like to just do a show and just leave it there. I believe, along with the constitution discussion and the republic, which I've been focusing on, I want to keep that momentum. And also, this Wednesday, I'll be with um, King's Counsel U Small, former Minister of Health, actually, in governor in on a previous government in Jamaica, and also I've got other persons which I believe line up, and I'm looking forward to get the Minister Malahu Fort on. I'm hoping to get even the Minister of Information on, you know, you know, because I believe that we need to tie this down and to let the people know and to let the people understand what is happening. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining those on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And for those who contributed, I want to thank you so much for those high level of contribution. And thank you, ICPC. Thank you, Letan Care. And Matunda, listen, brethren, let's keep the momentum and
Yeah, well,
keep the conversation going on this issue. And people of Jamaica, I always say this to people of Jamaica, you know, and I'm gonna go back to what Lord Reed said, and just unpick something here. The decision on whether to retain the Privy Council is entirely one for the Jamaican government and people. But what we just dissected a while ago is that it is stopping at the government and is not including the people. Yeah. So we want the people to take the rightful place in the whole process of this, and take it further from that. So, ladies and gentlemen, have a good night. I want to thank you so much to the late one Spills, and see you around some other time. Boom.